Ted Cruz is one of the many Republicans currently still salty over their recent loss in the Supreme Court of the question of same-sex marriage, which, by the way, woo, we won. And now he's going to try to change the subject from why it is that he continues to be against gay Americans having the same rights to get married as everyone else does, especially now that it is legal across the entire country, to why it is that the liberal media is so obsessed over the question of sex. Let's watch.
This fellow who's a local network reporter. He asked me initially about gay marriage. I told him I don't support gay marriage. Under the Constitution, marriage is a question for the states. He asked me the question again. I gave the answer again. He kept asking the question over and over again, and then it became, do you have an animosity towards gay Americans? And he asked that question something like 6 or 7 times, and it was apparently the only issue this reporter wanted to talk about. I was happy to answer it and happy to answer it again and again, but he kept on asking it. And finally, at some point, I said, what is it about the left? And I include the mainstream media in this, that you're obsessed with sex, that it's the only thing that matters to you. And he kept firing back, asking that question over and over and over again. I was talking at the time, as it moved on, I began talking about foreign policy. I began talking about the need to stand up and fight and defeat radical Islamic terrorism. And he comes back immediately with, do you have an animosity against gay Americans? When this guy asked the question 6 or 7 times, I ended up responding by asking, do you have an animosity towards Christians?
Yes, poor Ted Cruz. He was so desperate to move on to his carefully planned talking points about how he's going to defeat ISIS. But here he is having to answer the questions that, the people actually want to hear an answer to right now, such as his position on same-sex marriage. So let's talk about right now this idea that liberals are obsessed with sex because we're asking questions like that. That is a stupid thing to say. Now, I'm going to differentiate here between asking questions about sex and trying to legislate what you can do sexually. Now, which side is actually obsessed about sex? The one that wants conservatives to answer for their policies and so ask the questions, or the ones who want to make certain sexual acts legal and certain sexual acts not legal? I would argue it's probably the second, considering we're talking about fucking politicians. I think the political positions are the important question when talking about who's currently obsessed with something. Now, I, before filming this, was thinking, is there a sexual act that I am trying to outlaw, or that I want a certain group to not be able to do? And I don't think that I could really come up with one. I mean, I support bestiality laws, I suppose, especially when the animal doesn't seem to be consenting. Let's see. Nope, that pretty much sums it up. Now, look at the right, on the other hand. They think that you shouldn't, they would certainly morally legislate against a lot of sexual activity. Pretty much everything fun that you can think of, they don't want you to do. But they didn't want gay sex to be legal. Like, we're not just talking about, you can't get married but do whatever you want. They wanted it to be punishable by time in jail if you had sex with someone of your same sex. That's fucking ridiculous. Who's actually obsessed with sex? The one who asks why you believe what you do? Or the ones who are saying, I don't even do this thing, but if you do it, I'm gonna throw your ass in jail? Who's actually fucking obsessed with sex, Ted Cruz? I would argue it's you. I would argue it's Christians who, since there has been Christianity, have devoted something like 95% of their thought and writings into what is moral to do in the bedchamber, what is immoral to do in the bedchamber, or the car, or the closet, or the church, or wherever the hell you're doing the fucking sick shit that you get up to that you think is so wrong that we're doing. And that's why when these sex scandals come out and people are fucking doing autoerotic asphyxiation and stuff like that, it invariably ends up being a Republican, because they're the ones who are actually obsessed with this stuff. They're the ones who are thinking about it. They're the ones who are pushing down what they actually want to do. And so it just festers inside of them and produces more extreme forms of sexual expression that they're eventually going to hire a prostitute to help them act out, and hatred for what normal, unashamed humans in America are actually doing. And especially when we're talking about actual rights, when we're talking about the right to get married and all the other attendant rights that come with it, the right to pass on property, the right to visit in the hospital, the right to do your taxes a certain way, all of these rights that depend on you being able to get married. No, we think that you should have those rights. You think that they shouldn't because you don't like the particular way that they have sex. It's not I that am obsessed with sex. That's not true. We're both obsessed with sex, just for very different reasons. Ted Cruz, I hope that you have found this lesson educational.